Leave a comment where you are listening in the world. Please subscribe if you enjoy our content. Enjoy! Went on a cross-country RV trip this past spring with my friend Melissa and her 7 kids and 2 young German Shepherds, starting in West Virginia, in a 20-year-old RV christened Big Betsy, and almost everything that could go wrong did go wrong, haha. Among other things, the water lines broke the night before, so we had to rely on jugs of water the whole trip. The gas tank cap was busted, so it was a bitch to get the cap off. Tires had good tread, but a couple were pretty old, so they worried me. We found out the AUX batteries sucked, so we needed to jump start them with a power supply every time we stopped. The main battery cable had a bad connection, so every time we started the engine I had to stand in front and jiggle the cable while she turned the key. The slide jammed, and we had to get a pry bar to get it in and out. Driving through Colorado Springs, we blew a spark plug out and had to stop for repairs. Luckily, her brother, who used to be a diesel mechanic, was traveling with us, only took a day to fix. Regardless, we were still having a great time seeing the scenery, stopping at landmarks and national parks like Garden of the Gods, Mesa Verde, and the Grand Canyon. The furnace went out the night before we got to the Grand Canyon, and it got down to 17 degrees. I got up every hour for 10 minutes to heat the RV a bit using the propane stove, turned it off to rest, and then did it again every hour that night. Went to Roswell, Las Vegas, then on to Malibu to see the ocean and LA for a couple days. Then we headed up to Yellowstone and were blown away not only by the park itself, but the drive there from California, through Utah and Idaho, just so breathtakingly beautiful. If you've read this far, you've come to the point of the story. After Yellowstone, we had to leave from the west entrance since the other roads east and south hadn't been opened yet. We drove up into Montana, and for some reason, her brother insisted on getting off I-90 onto a 2-lane highway through the Crow and Northern Cheyenne reservations. He was perpetually driving like an hour ahead of us because his RV was faster, and he's a bit of a reckless dude. But we didn't want to be far from him in case we ran into engine trouble again, so we didn't really have a choice but to follow him, even though I voiced much hesitation on taking a backroad route in the dead of night through a reservation. So we find ourselves taking the ramp to RT-212, had just gotten onto the Crow reservation and stopped to gas up, and immediately things just feel odd. It's past 10 p.m., and as I'm pumping gas I'm hearing children running around playing off in the dark, and cars keep driving up slowly to check us out. I get back in and Melissa is already saying, "Get us out of here, it's creepy as fuck," so I do. We haul off down 212 in pursuit of her idiotic brother. Alright, he did save our bacon in Colorado Springs, so maybe idiotic is too strong. There's just nothing out there. Inky black skies, long desolate roads, sporadic groups of 4 or 5 houses every few miles. I'm acutely aware that we lost cell service as soon as we got on that highway, so I'm just praying that nothing goes wrong. I try to ignore the acute feeling that something is watching us. Her dogs start whining in their cages. The feeling of unease has continued, and I really don't want to stop, but Melissa said we needed to let them out to poop or we'd be cleaning up a mess. I pull over next to a big field, and she gets her oldest daughters Ariana and Isabella to leash them, and I throw open the door and let them out. As soon as they hit the grass, the 2 German Shepherds sight on something out in the darkness and start going absolutely apes hit. They're barking and straining against the leash, and the girls are struggling to control them. My blood pressure spikes. I look over at Melissa, and she looks completely bewildered, and I reach up to the overhead compartment and pocket my handgun I brought for protection. We get the girls and the dogs back in the RV and peel off down the highway again, cognizant of the fact that we're probably going to have to clean up shit since they wouldn't potty outside. They're back in their cages and are continuing to whine. I drive on for another 30 minutes or so, and they're still whining, and Melissa says we really need to stop again to let them go outside. This is the last thing I want to do, because the whole time, I still feel like something is watching us, and I'm just running through my head all the scary stories I've read about evil spirits, Wendigos, and motherfucking skinwalkers and shit. And I reason with myself that I'm just scaring myself, and they probably smelled a fox or coyote or something, and I really don't want to clean up dog shit from the cages on the side of a forgotten highway using jugs of water in the dark. We pull over again, and this time I take my gun with me and walk outside with the girls as they take the dogs out. I distinctly remember thinking, I don't know what good a gun will do against evil spirits, but I'm not going down without a fight. The moment their paws hit the ground, they immediately start howling and barking into the darkness again. The hair on the back of my neck stands up, and I look at Ariana, and she has this look of terror on her face. I say to the girls, "Get the dogs back in the RV, we're getting the hell out of here." But her dog Hazel is straining so hard at the leash she can't get her inside. So I pick up this German Shepherd in both arms and fucking heave her through the door and run inside. As I lean out to pull the door closed, I think to myself, this is the moment where something with sharp claws grabs my arm and pulls me into the night. Thankfully, as I'm here writing this today from my bedroom and not the belly of a Wendigo, this does not happen. The dogs go back to their cage and continue whining. I jump back in the driver's seat and gun it down the road, and Melissa leans over and says in a panicked whisper, "What is going on out here? Don't you feel it? Am I crazy or something, or does something feel really wrong?" I glance at her and remember one of the big no-nos of skinwalker lore. You don't talk about them, you don't even think of them if you can help it, because it draws their attention to you. I say, "No, you're not crazy, but I can't talk about it right now. I feel it too, but just trust me, we can't talk about it right now." As I'm cresting a small hill on the highway, I look over at her and say, "Just trust me here. We'll talk about it later, okay? But we can't right now." I look back ahead, and there is an enormous white rabbit standing on its back legs in the middle of the road. Looking back now with the benefit of a cool head, I'm sure it was just a bit bigger than normal, but I'm telling you in that moment, it looked huge, like it was 3.5 feet tall. I swerve this 37-foot-long RV around this beast of a hare, but thankfully keep control. I put the pedal to the metal and say, "I'm sorry, I don't care if the dogs shit in their cages. I'm not stopping again." And I didn't. And thankfully, they didn't LOL. We made it to the town of Spearfish safely and stopped for the night, and after visiting MT Rushmore the next day, we recounted the fear we all felt that night, and I told Melissa specifically why I didn't want to talk about it in the moment, and she said, "Yeah, I knew why. I've read all kinds of stuff about Native American legends." And I realized later with a chuckle that maybe those spirits were real, maybe they weren't. This happened to a friend of mine. Here is their story. This actually happened to me just this past Halloween. I'm commuting to work in a different city, and I'm working third shift, 7 p.m. to 3 a.m. Hate the hours, hate the hour drive home, but the pay is solid. So I get out of work after my Saturday shift, and it's now 3 a.m. on the Sunday morning of Halloween. As I'm getting on the highway, I belatedly realize it's Devil's Night, and I'm just glad to be on the highway and out of the city center without any traffic, drunks, or cops. Now, I live in the Midwest, and that is the worst time of year to be driving at night around here. Deer are rutting and acting all kinds of stupid, and gun season hasn't opened up yet to call their numbers. There have been deer carcasses scattered all over the highway for the last few weeks, so I'm driving super careful. I have my cruise control on, and I'm barely going the speed limit. About 20 minutes into my drive, 2 sets of headlights overtake me a few minutes apart. The first just keeps going, and becomes a set of tail lights ahead of me. I relax a bit, as I now have someone in front of me to hit the deer for me. I affectionately refer to it as having a fullback. Once this other car is a good way in front of me, I speed up a little, as I know I don't have to be as paranoid. That's when the second set of headlights overtakes me. Except they don't. They were about to pass me, but they ended up just sitting in my blind spot for about a mile in the other lane. I realize I sped up a bit as they were trying to pass me, and I hit my decelerate button for my cruise control twice so they can finish passing me. Except they don't. A rundown, black Jeep pulls up next to me, matching my speed. Their cabin light was on, but the windows were so fogged up I couldn't see anything. I thought it was a bit weird that they were driving side by side with me, but didn't really put any extra thought into it. I hit the decel button again, and they eventually pulled past me. The Jeep never changed lanes, and eventually caught up to the first car that had passed me. And I watched from a mile back as both sets of tail lights just drove on in front of me, side by side. At first I was really happy, because hey, extra metal in front of me to hit deer. Then I realized how weird the whole situation was. At this point, I was doing about 75, because I was trying to keep the distance between us small enough that deer weren't likely to run out into the road between us. It was weird, but it was getting me home faster, so I wasn't complaining. Then the first car to pass me hit his brakes and pulled into a rest area. I was bummed, because it meant I needed to slow down. It meant some extra time to get home, but hey, better than hitting a deer and needing a tow. As I'm slowing down, I realize that I'm still pretty rapidly catching up to the Jeep that was matching my speed earlier. I don't feel like involving myself in that weirdness again, so I back off on my cruise control some more. Except that I'm still catching up to it. I look down, and I've slowed down to about 55, and I'm still gaining on this car that was a mile ahead of me doing 80 not a minute ago. Every warning bell in my brain goes off at once. I reached back to make sure the Louisville Slugger I keep in my back seat was free and easy to grab, and I turned off the cruise control. I have no idea what kind of weird Pisco shit I've suddenly found myself in, but I'm ready to drive like hell to get away. It was at this moment that it clicked for me that the car that turned into the rest area probably did so because this Jeep was creeping them out, and they were trying to get away. After about another 30 seconds, I finally catch up to this Jeep, and I'm only going 50 or so at this point. They're still in the left lane. Right as I'm about to pull even with their passenger window, I gun the engine and shoot past them. There's an interchange for a major interstate route in a few miles, and a few miles past, that is a way station where there's usually a state trooper or two hanging out. As I'm debating my options about which would be best to take, the Jeep goes flying past me. This time, he keeps going, and I eventually lose track of which tail lights are his when he gets mixed in with some semis a few miles later. I don't know what the hell all of that was. Was someone drunk and just not paying attention? Was someone out trying to spook people on Devil's Night? Or was it some psycho out on the highway looking for someone particular? I have no fucking idea, but I was goddamn shook the rest of the ride home. The whole thing ended up being pretty anticlimactic, thankfully. But that was easily the weirdest thing that's happened to me driving at night. In college, I had to drive from the North Chicago suburbs to St. Louis to meet up with my girlfriend, who traveled down a few days earlier with her sorority to meet up with a chapter at a different school. I was supposed to leave mid-afternoon and make it by dinner. On a good day, it's about 5 or so hours. It was spring break, and I had a late final. I missed taking it during finals week and had to make it up, long story, which is why I was lagging behind my GF and driving down to meet her. The plan was take the final at 10 a, pack up, eat lunch, leave around 1 or 2, and make it by 7 p.m. or so. The professor surprised me and told me the makeup final was going to cover slightly different stuff to protect against cheating by talking to others that had taken it at the normal time. So, I ended up pulling a night or studying for it, and afterwards I didn't eat. I just crashed thinking I'd get a couple of hours sleep in. I ended up sleeping all day until 10 p. I was chronically short on sleep in college. The nighter put me way past my limit. When I woke up, I was kinda out of my head a little bit, you know, that fogged out feeling. So I get in touch with my GF. She's wondering where the hell I am. I tell her everything is okay, and I'll be down tomorrow. I hang up and think I should surprise her by rolling in late tonight. She'll be partying till 2 or 3 a.m. with her sorority anyway. I show up and grab a quick shower, and we can bang it out. This is college thinking. So I pack, and I'm on the road before 11 p.m. About halfway, right in the middle of nowhere, I start getting hit with this weird tiredness. I just slept all day, so I figured I just needed to push through. I thought I'd pull off at the next info sign and grab some coffee. About 15 minutes later, I see a sign, and turn off I-55 and drive to one of those convenience store/gas stations. I pull up feeling just wiped out, so I think I'll just recline my seat and take a little rest around back. Felt vulnerable to nap under the lights. The entire gas station plaza and store front was lit up, but around back it was in shadow. I pull around and lay back, and that's the last thing I remember before coming to on the road, behind the wheel doing 80 miles per hour. There were 2 extra large coffees from the place I'd stopped, both empty. It was about 4 a.m. I'm waking up because the car is sputtering and jerking. I'm the only car on the road. I note that there's a Springfield sign saying so many miles. When I pulled off, Springfield, Illinois was my next waypoint. I drift off onto the shoulder as the car dies. I'm completely out of gas. I wait for someone to pass, still dead tired. There are no cars. It's black night with only the interstate lights and cold. I realize my clothes are drenched in sweat, so I dig in my bag and pull out several layers of clothes and basically strip and redress on the side of the road. I get back in and start dozing, hoping a car will come by. Finally, the sun comes up and reflects off the frost on the road through my rear window, bouncing around the interior and blinding me through my eyelids. I wake up feeling somewhat in my right head again. About 10 minutes later, a state trooper pulls up behind me. My car obviously hadn't moved in a while, and he saw me before I saw him. He approaches, and I explain I've run out of gas in the middle of the night. I'm trying to get to St. Louis, etc. He goes, "Son, you're heading the wrong way for St. Louis," obviously thinking I'm on something. "No," I explain. "I just saw a sign right there as I was pulling over. Springfield is this way." I point down the road. "Son," he says, "you are in the great state of Missouri. He points to his uniform. He's a Missouri State Trooper, not Illinois. That sign is telling you how far we are from Springfield, Missouri. You are headed to Tulsa. I can't explain to you what it feels like for your brain to reboot, but mine did. I was trying to understand and piece together what happened, but I couldn't make sense of it. The trooper took me in for DUI and had my car towed, but they didn't find anything in my system. Somehow, I blacked out, bought 2 large coffees, bought just enough gas to make it through St. Louis and nearly halfway to Tulsa, and drank the coffees while in a fugue state driving along. Another trooper later told me, when releasing me later, that day they had received a call in the night from another driver that had passed a car fitting my description, doing 35 miles per hour in the middle lane. They sent a trooper out looking for me, but didn't find me until the next morning after sun up on the side of the road. The driver who called said they were very unsettled by me. They couldn't get my attention. This was before cell phones in the late 90s. They called it in from somewhere off the road. The weirdest thing is that this timeline doesn't make any sense at all. I've gone over it a bunch of times, and there's no way I would have had time to make it from when I left to halfway from St. Louis to Tulsa when I gassed out, especially pulling off to sleep at the gas station, and later doing only 35 miles per hour for a stretch. It's like when I blacked out at the convenience store I teleported or something. Also, there's no explanation for no cars or trucks on the road. I swear I didn't see any vehicles of any kind anywhere for the entire trip once I was in rural Illinois until the trooper. Yet I-55 and I-44 have at least truck traffic at all hours. And someone called in saying they couldn't get my attention, so I can only guess that I was hallucinating an empty road. I do remember feeling alone in the world, completely desolate during the night, and I just accepted at the time that it was normal for there to be no people anywhere in sight. Even at the convenience store/gas station, I vaguely noted that there wasn't a soul in sight. When I pulled around back, I thought I'd better get out of sight, because if someone saw me and wanted to do something, there's no one around for me to get help. It seemed natural that the store would be open, but with no one in it, not even an employee. My only guess is that once I got onto the rural part of I-55, I must have succumbed to highway hypnosis and did 100 plus mph all the way down before I pulled off. Then I don't know what happened, and I ended up overshooting St. Louis, probably getting confused by the Springfield signs making it seem like I was still in Illinois because I was on autopilot. So I somehow found my way to I-44, around St. Louis instead of I-55. Sleep deprivation is a trip, kids. A similar road trip story from my cousin. Me and my roommate took a drive from VA to Las Vegas for our last spring break. We both had work on the preceding Saturday and upcoming Monday, so not to waste any time getting there we agreed to make the trip in one go, no stops. It was a 30-hour drive across multiple time zones. We saw the sun rise and set multiple times on the drive. Obviously, we were both caffeinated up to our ears, and surprisingly were able to work out a system where one of us slept while the other drove and switch off whenever we hit exhaustion. About 18 to 20 hours into the drive, my roommate wakes me up for one of my shifts. We're in Texas and driving through a torrential downpour. I can barely see anything, and there's no other cars on the road for me to gauge myself with. This put a mountain of stress on my shoulders, and by the time I drove out of the storm it was pitch black outside, no street lights of city lights in sight. Exhaustion was setting in, and the GPS told me I had 100 or so miles to go on this road, so I woke my roommate up so he could orient himself before taking the wheel. Naturally, we're chatting about what we're going to get up to in Las Vegas and college stuff in general, so I'm paying less attention to the road. Not looking away from it or anything, just trying to focus my mind on the conversation to fight exhaustion. A few minutes into the conversation, my roommate says something like, "Do you see all these red lights, or am I tripping?" I look to my right and see red lights slowing, strobing on and off for miles upon miles into the dark horizon. I look to my left and see the same thing. We go back and forth contemplating what they might be for a while. Coincidentally, we had just turned on a Joe Rogan podcast about the Navy confirming the UFOs exist and talking about the different variations. The lights have me pretty shaken up now, but I'm powering through these last miles trying to get to the next test stop and refuel. Then, I guess with hallucinations setting in, it starts to look like all the lights are converging on our location. No big deal, I tell myself, until my roommate confirms that he's seeing the same thing. We turn off the podcast and wind down the windows for some cold air and hear the most constant humming sound coming from all around us as we're driving. At the point, we're both shitting our pants, thinking we're about to get abducted by aliens. Just as I'm thinking I'm going absolutely mad, the sun starts to rise, and I see all these blinking lights are just windmills. Got a good laugh in, and is definitely something I won't soon forget. I'm a bit late to the party, and my rule of thumb tells me to not waste my story on the 550th comment, but I simply cannot pass this one up. I grew up in rural Indiana. When I say rural, I mean middle of absolutely fucking nowhere Indiana. The closest grocery store was a 15-minute drive in good weather without traffic. I used to love exploring, and would just go driving around on new roads simply to see what there was to see. In doing this, I have come upon more than my fair share of something's not quite right kind of roads. Here are the stories I can remember off the top of my head. Number 2 is the creepiest. Number 1. I have been followed before. I was out driving in an area I'd never been to before that was impressively extra-rural. No houses, no telephone poles, nothing whatsoever for miles. The road takes an unusually shaped turn through some especially thick trees, and halfway through that curve you are suddenly met with a decline down into a beautiful creek valley. If you've ever heard the term the hollers of Kentucky, but never had a mental image of just what in the fuck a hollow is, this is it. A picture-perfect example. There was nothing but thickly wooded inclines back up to standard elevation for the region to my right, and on my left is some short distance of still young cornfield and a creek. Beyond that was the other side of this little valley, sloping back upwards towards normalcy and also heavily wooded. This place is beautiful, and I'm very much enjoying myself. The hollow isn't terribly wide, but good lord it was longer than you'd expect. Very unexpectedly I come around a curve in the hollow, as it follows the creek, and am suddenly in view of an upcoming property on my right nestled into the wooded incline. I pass one single rundown house with a couple of barns in an advanced state of decay, heavily overgrown yard and small collection of very ratty cars in various states of disassembly, all of them quite heavily rusted. It was daylight, so I couldn't tell if lights were on in the house, but it was the kind of place that you see and just immediately, unquestioningly presume to be long abandoned. This was not the residence of the farmer of those fields, as these barns housing the necessary tractors, trucks and various equipment was just right out of the question. It would have been financial suicide via a never-ending game of Russian roulette with gravity/roof instead of a gun. How is this house supplied with electricity, you might ask, if there are no telephone poles on either side of this road? Well, that's a goddamned good question, because I've been pondering it for years now and have no clue. The entire valley now feels uncomfortable and unwelcoming. I can't explain it, but I just simply knew that someone's were on that property when I passed. Less than 5 minutes later, this bright orange jacked-up Chevy pickup is in my rear view. He's gaining on me. I apply some pressure to the gas and make a turn back towards the nearest small town. He turns and is still gaining on me. I pick up the pace and make another turn towards the closest real town, the one with the grocery stores/restaurants. This guy is still coming and is getting closer and closer. I turn, then turn again and again to get onto the main local road. There's other cars around now, but none between myself and him. I've managed to maintain space between us, but I'm not positive that it wasn't without his allowing it. As I am now very close to town, I turn off the local highway. There weren't very many cars out anyways, to use a small out-of-the-way back road I like that comes into town right by the hospital. He follows me. I continue along this route with all its senseless turns and backtracks. He's following me still. I finally lost him on the real main road by blowing through a yellow light and speeding beyond any reasonably defensible amount. 911 dialed in my phone and ready to go. Number 2. I'm out exploring, and I'm in yet another impressively extra-rural area. The county road here follows the creek, then suddenly turns away from it and comes up out of the valley. Then there is a series of 90-degree turns navigating fields whose owners saw to it that the local roads wouldn't be a perfect grid pattern. It's fast approaching dusk on a long summer day. The windows are down, and I'm playing my iPod on the radio with one of those FM transceivers that you punch in an empty radio station's frequency, and it'll broadcast your iPod onto it. The next 90 degrees jog comes up, and I find that it can go on straight if I so chose. No mailbox, there's even a road sign. It is a public road. There was no bridge out sign, no road closed, nothing. The road, if you went straight, wasn't paved. It was barely gravel. It was a 2-track with grass in the middle. I'm in a large Dodge Ram with a small suspension lift and other bells/whistles. Fuck it, let's go. I start down the road, and after a small stretch with real tall corn on either side I come to some woods. The woods are very thick, and my radio suddenly goes to static. It's just now reaching dusk, and there is an orange sky in my mirrors, but now it is very, very dark in these woods. The road is devolving rapidly. It's turning into more of a trail than a road. Where a modern road would have concrete sides and guardrails over small brooks, here the gravel just used bigger rocks. I hit a real big bump, and my radio suddenly comes in clear as day. "Do you want to die a virgin?" I laugh it off, noticeably shaken. I murmur something about an unfriendly Johnny-come-lately. It goes back to static immediately, and to my left a meadow opens up through the trees. My worries are immediately gone, and I tear off down a small decline into the meadow, exploring in 4x4. It's getting darker, so I head back to the trail/road and turn to continue the way I was going originally. The radio is coming in and out with unintelligible talking. I reason to myself that it's one of those audiobook channels. I come up to a dead end. There's no way to turn around. The trail/road used to have a bridge here, but it's long gone, and before me is air and water. I'm trying to figure out if I want to try to turn around or what to do, and I notice 5 people, 2 across the way where the road begins again, 1 on the bank opposite me, and 2 downstream on the bank I'm on. They're all staring at me. Assuming I've interrupted some fishing time, I back out down the trail/road towards the current roads until I find a clearing wide enough to turn around. I decide to go through the meadow once more, not creeped out at all honestly. I should have been. After some time in the meadow, I notice a spot in the tree line where I could go down to some very wet dirt and go for it. I get down there and horse around a bit. The radio comes on. "Have you made your decision?" Okay, now I'm a bit creeped out, and decide to keep my cool but exit the area. The radio is now silent, not static. I make to go up the incline back into the meadow, but can't quite do it with the slippery mud. The radio comes back. "Time's up. Static. We're coming." Okay, engage fully freak the fuck out mode. I turn off the radio and shift it into 4 low and gun it. I make it up the incline into the meadow, and notice all 5 guys are now in the tree line of the meadow glaring. I fucking noped the fuck out of there at full speed, and went flying down the trail/road back to the real road, just in time to see the sun deep below the horizon. The drive home was silent and mentally exhausting. I have never returned there. The area. I'll update or clarify later if there's interest. Right now I'm late to class. I remembered the other really good story I have. In high school I had an extremely close friend. It was a once-in-a-lifetime kind of friendship, but that's another story and it's sad. On the very same back route I mentioned in story number 1 that comes out by the hospital, my friend, myself, and another mutual friend were on our way out of town towards my parents' house with fresh fireworks for the 4th. It was on the night end of the evening, with the sun behind the horizon for a few minutes by this point. This road follows the interstate for a ways, and then peels off to join the countryside grid pattern, with conifer windblocks on both sides the whole way down the stretch parallel to the interstate. We come around the corner out into the grid pattern, and the trees open up to farmland. Parked in the middle of 1.5-lane county gravel, facing away from us is a red Jeep/SUV thing, with 2 teenage-looking guys standing at the rear bumper grinning like damn fools with firecrackers going off all across the road. I pull to a stop. My friends and I were, past tense, all pretty big guys filled to the brim with naivety. We just sit there thinking, what now? One of them turns around and walks back towards the front of the Jeep/SUV, and my friend I mentioned at the beginning got very serious in a big hurry, tapped my shoulder and said, "Just go." He wouldn't explain anything else, just kept repeating go, just go, drive around them. At this point I thanked the stars we were in a larger vehicle, and we just went through the ditch and kept on moving. In our rear view, and their headlights we saw the 2 guys standing at the front of their Jeep thing now, holding something. We couldn't tell exactly what, but it wasn't hospitality. That went from WTF to get the fuck out in a big hurry, and was how I learned people do car traps. I stopped at a gas station back in 2008, and there was a guy who was using a payphone to talk to his girlfriend, or ex. He was screaming, and said he was going to kill somebody because of her. As I was getting in my car, he looked at me and slammed down the phone. I started my car and drove off. I was a little worried, but didn't consider his threat to be real. After a few minutes, he catches up to me on the main road. He starts tailgating me, and I get the weird suspicion that he actually wants to kill me. I'm a little overly paranoid about the world, so I react almost immediately. I take a few random roads that make no sense, totally out of the way to get to where I am going, and sure enough, he follows me. Finally I get to the gate of my community. I put in my password, and the gate opens. He speeds up before the gate closes to get in. I see this often though, so even though I'm concerned, I just go on with it. Right after I make the left turn into my cul-de-sac, I finally realize that he 100% following me. There are too many roads for him to live on my street. Each street has 50 condos, but mine only had 8. So anyways, instead of using a blinker, I just jerk my car to the left and get into my street. Seriously, dude goes straight, missing the turn, and slams on his brakes. You can even hear it. I'm more curious than anything else, so I keep looking at my rear view while going the speed limit. Guess what? I see his reverse lamps turn on. I literally slam the gas on my Xterra and get to my house. I turn off all of my lights inside of my car, not sure why, and I bolt out and run into my condo. I turn off all of the lights in my condo, and I look outside. There was outdoor lighting, so you couldn't see in if the lights were off. He parks his car, but leaves it running, gets out, paces around my car, gets back in his, and drives away. The next morning I get my cold groceries from the gas station and throw them away. This was in Sarasota, Florida University, and 75 back in the day. Also, one night in Gainesville at CVS at night, a guy said, "Hey," and I said, "Hi." This was back in 2010. He then said, "I just want to ask you a question." I was like, "What's the question?" He then proceeded to move towards me aggressively, so I decided to jump in my car, the Xterra again. I locked the doors and rolled down the window. He said, "I just want to ask you a question," in a normal tone. I said, "Well, you can ask me while I'm in my car." He then said, "Just get out and let me ask you a question." I said, "Nah man, I'm good, just ask me while I'm here." I then proceeded to put the car in reverse. As soon as my car started to move, he started screaming, "I just want to ask you a question." He then started to sprint towards my car after I switched to drive and kept screaming, "I just want to ask you a question." This was on the corner of SW and Archer, if anybody is familiar with the area. Finally, a few months ago, I was in a different car now, lol. I was with 4 friends, and we went to Wawa for some late night subs. We all ordered what we wanted to and left. No problems at all. As we were leaving, a car zoomed past us on a 30 miles per hour road and cut us off. I see this often, I don't think twice about it. To be honest, that speed limit is way too slow, and most people ignore it. Anyways, the car continues to speed, going at least 60 miles per hour until we cannot see them. Finally, after a mile or so, the car slams on their brakes and pulls into a driveway. The driver gets out, no shirt, and takes a piss on this person's property. I think nothing of it, based on my experience in Florida. This seems kinda normal. We pass them, take a few turns, and all is well. Out of nowhere, this goddamn car comes up to us and starts tailgating us and starts swerving and wilding out. We start to joke about how this dude is following us. Half of the car agrees. The other half says we are pussies for thinking that. I do as I normally do and start to drive in a direction that makes no sense. Instead of going from point A to point B, I go through the whole alphabet, lol. We finally realize after the 8th or 9th turn that this dude is following us. What's incredibly funny about this is that the dudes who were acting hard and calling us pussies started to get really scared, ha ha ha. Anyways, finally we get to a highway road where the speed limit is 50 miles per hour and it's 3 lanes. I decided to get in the right lane and go around 30 miles per hour. This is almost always validation in regards to whether or not you're being followed. Pro tip, if you're going half the speed limit and the other lanes are open and there is still a person behind you, you are either A, being followed, or B, it's an old person. So after turning into the right lane, the dude gets in the left lane. We are all halfway disappointed, but 100% relieved that he isn't actually following us. However, guess what happens next? He slams on his brakes and moves to the middle lane to get right next to us. As soon as that happened, I slam on the gas, and we get away by making a last-minute U-turn, and that's it. It's almost like driving in FL at night is a risk. I'm not from FL. I hated it back in the day, and I still do. The people from country Florida are what they are, and they aren't like me. I ended up living here because my wife is from here. For whatever reason, her father loves it. It's been a headache ever since. Out of the 30 years of my life I've spent on this earth, less than 6 of them were in FL. I'll be goddamned if I haven't seen more shit down here than anywhere else combined, times 10. A guy I spoke to shared this story with me. A strange thing happened to my wife and I back in around 2005/2006 while driving at night in the UK. We were driving from my wife's parents' house in Somerset quite late on a Sunday night back to our house in London. It was a clear, dry evening. There was nothing remarkable about the weather, or anything else for that matter. Towards 10 p.m., we were approaching a town called Corsham in Wiltshire. I was driving and my wife was navigating using a road atlas. As I remember, the surroundings became more built up with street lights and trees in a spot where a couple of other roads joined ours. My wife said that we needed to keep going straight and pointed directly ahead. There was no traffic waiting to join our road, so I carried straight on. I double-checked both roads again, when suddenly a thick patch of mist shot across the road from right to left in front of us. It must have been about 10 to 15 meters across, about 5 meters high, and my guess, it was traveling at about 50 miles per hour. The speed it appeared at was quite alarming, and I instinctively hit the brakes and saw our headlights, the pop-up type, temporarily disappear into the mist which then engulfed the car as it passed over us. As this happened, I became disoriented. I was fully conscious and knew that something odd was happening. I went dizzy and experienced the sensation of my car's seat being spun backwards 360 degrees with me in it. I could see the road ahead, but due to the dizziness, it suddenly appeared to go vertical and then fall to the side before becoming normal again. In the meantime, I knew I was driving and that there was no other traffic, so made a conscious effort to hold the steering wheel straight with both hands and brake to come to a halt. The mist carried on its way, and after a few seconds, everything cleared. A bit shocked, I asked, "What the F*** was that?" To which my wife answered, "I have no idea, but I feel like I've just been spun backwards in my seat, and I went really dizzy." We pulled over to the side of the road and gathered our thoughts before continuing with our journey. We were both quite shaken. We've no idea what might have been in this mist to cause us both to get disoriented in the same way. It arrived, traveling at speed, and was then gone. It wasn't a windy evening. This mist seemed to be traveling, rather than just blowing around, if that makes sense. There was no smell to it, so I don't think it was a chemical cloud of something that disoriented us both, but I guess it could have been. The car was always maintained properly, and wasn't leaking any fumes into the passenger compartment. Besides, the car was a convertible and, while we had the roof up at the time, it wasn't nearly as airtight as a normal car, so any fumes wouldn't necessarily hang around. I'm not a meteorologist, but there was no reason why there should have been any mist around that night. I was driving, so definitely hadn't been drinking. Nor had my wife. The car has quite a firm ride, so there was no wobbling effect from soft suspension. All things I've considered, but haven't come up with a viable explanation. It was only when looking around online recently that I found that Corsham seems to be quite well known for underground mines and buildings. I think there was something more to this mist than normal. I'd love to know what. Edit. I kind of expected this to get lost at the bottom, but the replies are welcome. I've looked into it on occasion over the years, and the only thing that fits the bill is a thing called a time storm. These are basically disorienting mists that appear suddenly, and the people who experience them lose time somehow. The mists are there for a second or two, but maybe 20 minutes pass for those who experience them. I can't say if time passed. The car had no clock. We didn't think to look at our watches. Maybe it was one of them. I don't think we'll ever really find out. We were crossing the United States on a road trip about a year and a half ago. It was November, and we were stopping and camping places along the way. It was a ton of fun, but one night some weird shit happened. We were leaving our campground in Rocky Mountain National Park and driving all the way through the day to the Grand Canyon South Rim. The North Rim is closed for the winter. It was a long and tiring drive. Snowstorm in the mountains, and then it was dark, windy, and icy through Utah. Pretty scary conditions, but we handled them. Fast forward to about 1:30 a.m. We're driving across middle of nowhere, Arizona, and it's completely dark. The weather is finally a bit better, so we think the stressful driving was behind us. I'm in the passenger seat, awake but kind of dozing off here and there. Friend number 1 was driving. Friend number 2 was dead asleep in the back. I'm just sort of looking out the window into the very, very dark desert landscape when all of a sudden some headlights come on way off the road. I'm talking maybe a mile out there. At this point we hadn't seen very many cars at all, so I just sort of mentioned it to my friend driving. Someone's way out there. Maybe 5 minutes later, I'm sort of keeping an eye behind us to see where this mystery car goes. Sure enough, when it eventually makes it to the road, it turns in behind us. At this point, it was barely visible on the horizon, so maybe 2 to 3 miles behind us. A few minutes later, my friend driving was like, "Does it seem to you like it's gaining on us?" It definitely did. The lights were getting closer. It's the middle of nowhere, Arizona, and we were already going 65 to 70, so this car was moving at a good pace. My friend sped up to 75, and we kept an eye on it. A few more minutes go by. We both agree it's definitely still getting closer. At this point, the fear is kicking in. Is it a cop? Probably not. He'd turn on his lights to get us to slow down. At this point, we start thinking about how truly alone we are out in this desert. Even if we called the police, it would be hard to give an exact location. And even if we did, it felt like it would be some time before they got to us. At this point, we're freaking out. I tell me friend to pick up the pace. If we get pulled over, we'll just tell them what was happening. He picks it up to 90 miles per hour. A couple minutes later, it's obvious the car is still catching up. He speeds up to almost 100 miles per hour. He drives an older Ford Focus, so this thing is shaking at this point, barely able to manage the speed. The car is still catching us. I'm frantically searching Google Maps at this point, looking for a discernible landmark, so I can call the cops and tell them where we are. We had no weapons in the car, so we felt very vulnerable. After a couple minutes driving as fast as the little Focus can take us, the pursuing vehicle has caught up to within maybe 70 yards. Finally, at this point we can see the lights of a town in the distance. We figure we just pull into a gas station or something occupied and take it from there. We fly into this town, only slowing down to maybe 70. As we enter, there starts to be some street lights, but it's still pretty much dead. No other cars on the road. I look back to see what the other car looked like in the light. Turns out it was a late 90s model station wagon. No police markings or anything. We go through the first stoplight in the town, which wasn't far from the edge. The station wagon, only a bit behind us at this point, slows down suddenly for the intersection. He pulls a U-turn at the intersection, and then just tears back off into the desert. The relief in the car was palpable. Why was the car chasing us? I hope to God just to be funny and scare us. I'm still convinced something awful could have happened if they had caught us. To this day, it's one of the most genuine moments of fear I've felt in my life. It just triggered this hunter/hunted instinct that comes from the feeling of being chased. We just knew we couldn't let them catch us. Another story I can share from someone I know. Usually to work early in the AM, and if I work nights, home super late. And before the reply shitstorm, I have a conceal/carry permit from my state, which included a 6-month wait, mental health check required by a doctor, and a federal background check. I live out in a rural area, and have a home that sits on the end of an unlit 2-lane road, surrounded by woods everywhere. One night I have my head/fog lights on instead of my brights, as my car sits low, and it is easier in total darkness to see/avoid deer that way. As I am coming up to turn off the road to my house, on the opposite side of the road I see 2 men, all in dark brown/black, with book bags and ski masks on. I slowed enough to hit them with my brights, and they sort of moved and crouched into a drainage ditch across the road. I pulled in between my house and my neighbors, and at first dialed the non-emergency number. As I am talking to the dispatcher, the back of my car faces the road, parallel to the house. In my side mirror I catch something moving, and in the rearview mirror I see the same 2 men moving along the tree line towards me. I sped away, informed the dispatcher, and she immediately dispatched 2 units. 45 minutes with spotlights, multiple squad cars, nothing. I drive home. The cops went with me as I went inside, checked the house, locked it up. Cops said just call if you see anything. They take prowling activity very seriously. Have them reassure my girlfriend we are safe. They can be here in minutes, blah blah blah. So that was maybe 10 p.m. I work crazy hours, so I have to be up at 4 a.m. At 3 a.m. my dog starts at the door like she's sick. She never wants to go out when she's sleeping. Yes, she is an old dog who thinks she's a person. So I figure, great, have to deal with a sick dog before work and I've barely slept. Let her out, and she beelines for a corner of my fence. Usually I hear brush moving as deer come up to my fence at night. My dog has chased them away from me before, smiley face. Instead, silence. She won't come inside right away. I finally have to whistle to get her attention to get back in. I start getting that cold ice feeling like something is off. My driveway snakes down a little tree-lined lane to the road. It's dark, so I flip all the outside lights on and wake my girlfriend. Tell her I'm paranoid, maybe crazy, but make sure I leave for work this AM at Y. But watch out the window to make sure I drive off, and leave lights/locks on. I get in my car, shut the door, before I can even start it. In my side mirror I see, out from behind a large tree at the end of my drive, walk a man in dark clothes and a ski mask. I remember watching him start walking towards me just frozen. I can't believe how long I just watched him come towards me. Then all my adrenaline hit. I drew my gun and got out of the car. He was maybe 10 feet away. Told him to stop, show his hands, or he will be shot. As bad as it all was, this is the actual creepy part to me. He said nothing, kept his hands at his sides, and just stared at me. My SO smartly had her phone with her watching all this, and must have called 911 in a second flat. For 3 minutes and 25 seconds I sat waiting for the police to show up. I know I felt every second. Never been so scared in my life. Hopped on adrenaline, I just kept shouting stuff at this guy, who just stared. I will never forget that stare from behind that ski mask. Fuck the guy they caught in California who used one in all those crimes. It is indescribably terrifying to just have a ski mask and eyes looking at you. The cops finally pull up, and he doesn't even flinch. He never stopped fucking staring at me. In retrospect, that probably helped me from getting shot, as the cops pulled up to a civilian with a weapon drawn. It was pretty obvious with a ski mask on who called the police, though. All the cops asked me to do was lower and safety my weapon, and step towards his voice until he says stop, and do not do anything else. Eventually the guy turned to the police, and even then he just sat down cross-legged on the ground. It was surreal. Now I thought between me catching him and the police he would cooperate, but the cops nearly shot him, as he would only keep his hands on his knees where he was sitting. He wouldn't comply with any instructions as far as raising his hands or facing the ground. Finally both officers went to approach him, and the deputy covering his partner said quietly to me, "If either of us screams, officer in danger, don't think. I need you to keep that weapon out and make sure we are safe and doing our job until another unit arrives." Thank God, he just sort of went limp as they cuffed him. Apparently a traffic accident tied up their second car. It was almost 10 minutes until another squad car came roaring off the road. Only thing in his pockets was a 3 to 4 inch hunting knife. Not guessing on his intention with that. Had to miss work to make a statement at the station and conduct an interview. Also had paperwork to sign off on to get my pistol back. Guess they checked to make sure it wasn't fired, and they took a sample round too. We had a gas station robbed and the clerk shot at, not injured. My gun was the same caliber, so at the time they were looking for a match. All that was cleared, my pistol returned. So apparently the guy denied being out earlier that night, said there was no other guy with him. He wasn't doing anything. Well, that second police car went around my house and stayed with my girlfriend. As they got to the back of my house, there were footprints over my fence, and they arrested his partner hiding against my tool shed. Inside my shed were 2 bags filled with stolen items. Even worse, a little burglar's kit with screwdrivers, pry bar, hammers, and K-bar style military knife. Guy 1 ended up being more mentally unstable. He got some heavy charges, but as far as I know is serving it all in an institution due to his mental issues. Guy 2 had serious priors, and I get chills now even thinking about what they intended to do with him hiding out back. At best a home invasion and robbery, at worst. I don't like thinking about what they might have done. Second guy got his 3rd strike in court, and I only know based on age that he'll most likely be dead by the time he is eligible for any kind of parole/appeal. This happened one night at around 2 a.m., and it's probably not that scary or anything to anyone, but it still really bothers me to think about to this day, and I still don't have much of an explanation for anything that happened. It also requires a little bit of backstory, I guess. My roommate and I were in the car, driving through central Alberta. We are not the going out and partying type. We are definitely more the type to consider getting in the car and driving in no particular direction a good Saturday night. We're both very much spontaneous and adventurous and would love nothing more than to be able to just pick up and go at any given time. But we were in university and both had full-time jobs at that point. So the best we could do was get in her janky little Honda Civic that was older than us both and see where the highway would take us. One of my favorites of our adventures was a day where she picked me up and we ended up pulling off the highway to take pictures in a field with a bunch of hay bales, and then took pictures at the tiny little church on the side of the highway. We ended up driving a little farther forward, seeing signs for an upcoming town, and when we pulled off the highway we realized it was actually a creepy little hamlet with a population of 62 people that looked straight out of a horror movie. That will eventually become relevant. Anyways, one evening we picked a little town about 30 minutes outside of the city we lived in, and planned to drive there and explore the town at night. We didn't realize that the town was actually so small that it took about a minute to drive through it on the highway, and before we realized what happened we totally missed the town. We couldn't get off the highway or turn around at that point, so we just kind of shrugged and decided to keep going until we hit the next small town. I laughed and said, "Hey, as long as we don't end up in a creepy little hamlet again." We just kept driving and eventually got to a point where we felt a little bit lost, but we're still enjoying the ride. We've got the radio on, we're chatting and just enjoying the drive, it's fine. After about 30 minutes of driving, my roommate remarked, "Okay, seriously, I don't know where we are. I don't even know if we're going north, south, whatever." I wasn't really too concerned at that moment. Really, what was the worst that could happen? We had a map in the glove box. We both had our phones and a couple chargers in the car, it's fine. We're just on an adventure. We've done this pretty much every second weekend for 5 years straight. We read the signs on the side of the road, and one of them said the name of what we assumed was the closest town, and we decided to go there. At one point, it had been about 45 minutes since we missed the first town, and we drove past a building on the highway. It was 2 a.m. and pitch black outside, and I didn't think anything of it until my roommate whipped towards me and blurted out, "We've been here before." I was really confused, and the urgency in her voice kind of freaked me out. "That's a church. We took pictures in that church, and in that field across the highway. We've already been to the town we saw on that sign. It's that hamlet with like 50 people in it." I thought, okay, that's super weird. All at once, after almost an hour of having no clue where we were or what direction we were driving, we knew exactly where we were, how far away from home we were, and what we were close to. We were accidentally on our way to the creepy little hamlet I made a joke about staying away from. We kind of laughed it off, but we both felt like it was really weird that we accidentally found a place we already adventured to, because neither of us even remembered what the name of the church was, and before that moment, I could never have gotten us back to that spot. Like I said, weird but not super scary or anything. We kept driving to see what was ahead because the first time we were there, we turned around and went home after the church. We didn't really say anything to each other for almost 10 minutes, but in that time, I can't explain it, but I started feeling really, really uneasy. Like, something was just really wrong, and I did not want to be on that road anymore. I didn't say anything though, because I've been known to get the heebie-jeebies over stupid stuff all the time, and I just figured it was a weird deja vu kind of thing because of the church. Anyways, after driving a bit, there was suddenly a bunch of street lights on the side of the road. My roommate and I looked at each other and said, "That's weird." Because why would there be street lights on the side of a shitty little back road highway? We followed the road a bit longer, because there was nowhere to turn off or turn around. The road eventually turned into a huge power plant, and at the exact same time we both said, "That's creepy." Think Stranger Things creepy. Neither of us knew it was there, and there wasn't a single sign leading up to it until we were already on the road onto the property. My roommate turned off the second she could and said, "I'm turning around. I don't want to be on this road anymore." We drove back at least 50 kilometers per hour over the speed limit until we got back into the city. When we got home, I was still really freaked out, so we sat up in bed for a bit together. I asked her if she felt as creeped out as I did. I fully expected her to say no, because this girl has nerves of steel. It takes a lot to even rattle her a little bit, never mind scare her. She told me absolutely. She said that as soon as we drove past the church, she got this really uneasy feeling in the pit of her stomach and immediately did not want to be on that road anymore. She described it as, you know how people say there's things that if you see them on the side of the road, you should get off that road as soon as possible? Like, if there's a car seat or something, you shouldn't stop for it because it could be really dangerous. And until we got back into the city, I had this really awful feeling that someone or something was going to come running into the middle of the road. I don't know why, but it was just so unsettling to me. Neither of us said anything until we got home, but we both had the exact same gut feeling that we needed to turn around and go home, and that we did not want to be on that road anymore. I still don't really have an explanation for why it creeped me out so much, and we've gone adventuring like that many times since then, and I have never felt like that since. I really do think it was just a weird sense of deja vu, and we both just silently freaked ourselves out, and the weird sequence of events leading up to and following the situation. Either way, it still really freaks me out, and every once in a while I have nightmares about driving down that power plant road.